My name's Roy West,
I'm Ryan Kincaid.
and we're going to be presenting on the impact of COVID-19 on the arts and other nonprofits. So the coronavirus has affected almost all sectors of business. One sector in particular that has been severely impacted is the arts and other nonprofits. The arts sector accounts for many created jobs, investment in urban areas, and encourages tourists to spend more, stay longer, and keep coming back. One quote that I really like from our article is how they describe the arts and nonprofit sector. They described it as being socially significant and is at its core the custodian of the world's material and intangible culture.
That's a good film.
So some of the challenges that the sector faces is that they're premised on dense physical contact. Organizations now are scrambling to boost their online presence, but most do not have the business model to succeed. Very few have a chance of making up for the loss in revenue from live performances and attendance, or finding a use for their expensive physical infrastructure that was, until recently, essential to their economic model. Now a lot of these organizations have to build a bridge from the reasonably well-defined short term to the very misty long term.
So they essentially lost all their customers.
Yeah, pretty much. I know a lot of artists, they're doing like live streams now, which I think is pretty interesting. But of course, that's not really generating any revenue for them or like, these venues that were hosting them before. And it's, yeah. We'll get
Yeah,
it later on.
a lot of events that they would have that, like at the art gallery here in Rochester, they'd have a lot of events there that had nothing really to do with the art gallery itself, just an event space.
Yeah. So they'd host like other events that weren't really related because it's just a nice venue. So now all that's, they can't do that anymore.
And that generated revenue.
Yeah. So I looked at 3 drivers to which the organizations are paying a lot of attention to now in the short term. And these 3 drivers are the balance sheet, working capital, reserves, endowment, and debt. The underlying business model, which is the ratio of earned income to contributed income and the ratio of fixed to variable assets. And lastly, the capacity and willingness of stakeholders to fund short-term cash demands. So firstly, the balance sheet, working capital, reserves, endowment, and debt. Like businesses everywhere, the arts organizations and nonprofits are quickly facing cash flow problems. A 2018 report found that the average U.S. arts organization has 2 months of working capital, and the average orchestra some 15 days. And generally, the longer you've been around and the bigger you are, the stronger your balance sheet. For example, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, which is shown here, celebrated its 150th anniversary this year and has an endowment of several $1 billion.
Now, is that so they will be able to they'll be able to generate plenty of funds?
Yeah, they'll have a lot of reserves in, and they'll be fine for the period of time. But other places that don't have a lot of reserve money, they'll have to probably try to find sources elsewhere, or they'll have to basically shut down for the time being, and
but the average
it'll be a much better job.
The average orchestra only has 2 weeks essentially.
Yeah, so a lot of these organizations, they rely on continued shows to succeed. Like the next show that comes in, they'll generate revenue off of. But if they don't have anything going on, a lot of their expenses outweighs the amount of money that they have coming in. So the second driver of this that these businesses have to pay attention to is their underlying business model, which is the ratio of earned income to contributed income and the ratio of fixed to variable asset or cost. So the performing arts are much more reliant on earned income, which is basically just ticket sales. It accounts for over 60% of their total income, as opposed to museums, which is about 30% of their income. Organizations that are reliant on earned income as opposed to contributed are much more disadvantaged. I also think during this time period, these like museums that are much more reliant on contributed income, they'll have a easier time surviving this because um, this won't really slow down the amount of money that's coming in through contributed income. It might actually improve it because people want to donate more. If there's a call for donations, they'll probably respond quicker. And also organizations that are less flexible in cutting costs are disadvantaged in managing their expenses in the short term. So these would be organizations with extensive real estate costs and also onerous labor agreements. Lastly, the last driver in the short term that these businesses have to pay attention to is the capacity and willingness of stakeholders to fund short-term cash demands. So the stakeholders for the arts and nonprofits are boards, foundations, and the government. It's unclear how quickly some of the boards of these organizations are acting, but foundations are moving to provide liquidity. For example, recently the New York City COVID-19 Response and Impact Fund was announced to provide $75 million to New York City culture institutions, and this would help nonprofit organizations that have an annual operating budget of under $20 million. And the sector is also lobbying for earmarks in the current federal rescue package, and also federal tax filings may be delayed. So the situation that these organizations face now is similar to other modern crises like after 9/11 and after 2008. And the sector will be buying time to apply working capital and lobbying for easements on restricted funding, fundraising, and borrowing. So the arts organizations must use their time wisely and must know in what direction they're expected to head in the long term. So a lot of this situation now is something that a lot of these organizations have been through before. It's really just a matter of how long this will last, and how they will be able to, pay for their working capital right now because they have no revenue.
Sure. And then it'll probably be a longer time before they get back up to the capacity that they were running. Simply because even if they start performing, would you go to a performance or see a movie or a concert? Would you guys? If next week or 2 weeks from now they said everything is fine, would you go back and see a concert?
2 weeks? I don't know.
How about 3 months?
Maybe.
Probably by then I'd feel a little bit more comfortable at that point.
Yeah, so you'll feel more comfortable as time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the recovery is going to be slow for a lot of the performing arts.
Yeah, I think so. I actually had some concerts planned, and I don't know. I think one of them already was canceled, and I think another one might still go on, but there's a chance that it'll probably be canceled, honestly.
When is it?
I had one in May that was canceled, and I think the next one was in June, so I really don't know. And also I have a trip to Ireland in August, and who knows if that'll happen, but that's a ways out. But we're going to talk a little bit about the long-term problems that we actually just started discussing.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the long-term trends is changing in demographics, and so crises like this make changes and trends move a lot quicker than before. And one of the struggles that certain theaters and art galleries deal with is getting younger people to attend. And many people nowadays are looking, especially young people, are looking for more informal experiences. And this process for certain parts of the arts has been a lot slower than most other companies have gone through.
I'll switch.
Yeah. And then another thing, this is after this is over, especially if there isn't a vaccine, like we said before, that a lot of people, especially older people, will be a lot more reluctant to attend certain events where there's these large amount of crowds because they're a lot more susceptible to the coronavirus. And even if this were to end like a week from now, which is very unlikely, but formal of like these becoming more informal will still be the trend, and the arts, right now the arts really doesn't have a lot of money because of this, and it's going to be a lot harder to make this change. And also, since a lot of international travel plans are being canceled, people are going to be looking for other things to do, and I think that that could be to the arts advantage. But if they can't make it more appealing to all demographics, it's going to be a lot harder to recover.
That's really a good point about, the arts have a significantly older population that participates. And if they're the ones that are going to be more at risk, even as we move forward, that's going to have a really big effect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Like, I know there's people that go down into Rochester and go and watch musicals all the time, or go and see orchestras playing, and that's generally an older crowd. Like, I've gone to a musical before down there, and it was generally an older crowd, and yeah, I couldn't imagine they would want to go back to something like that after just a few months.
Yeah, when you look at the RPO, even I feel young compared to most of the people that are there. That's interesting. That's really going to be a big thing. Huh. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so that's the end for us.
Okay, go back to international travel. What do you think is going to happen with that?
Do you want to go ahead, Ryan? Do you have anything? Because I can.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a lot of people even if international travel will be allowed, a lot of people are canceling those plans, and especially for the summer. And so people are going to be looking for other things to do because they had all this time blocked out for them to go and have a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah.
Right. What about Ireland? You're going to Ireland, or that's your plan?
Yeah, that's our plan right now, is to go to Ireland in August. It's just gonna just break people's trips into different categories. So anything that's considered non-essential, people might consider canceling themselves. Like any business travel, people probably aren't doing right now, but in a little bit, business travel would probably definitely pick up. And then there's also some people that just don't care, which I see a lot. Like, there's people that are probably vacationing right now somewhere, which is rather irresponsible. That's probably a small percentage, though. To get the general body of the population, I don't know. It'd probably have to be, I don't know. If it's like a few months, like if it's by May and we see like the curve going down, I think people would start traveling again. I think it really just depends on what's on the news, because that's what I end up doing in the afternoons, is watching the news and seeing, if there's new cases in the county, or what's the curve looking like in New York City, stuff like that. So I think it just depends on how kind of like the statistics of all of this. And then, of course, what's going to happen if there's like a resurgence of COVID? That could be a dangerous thing, because then people would be unwilling to do another quarantine or prolong it. If like we get back to business as usual and suddenly we have another problem, like, are people even willing to put up with that? I don't know.
Everything is sort of unknown. So many variables we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Why do you think we hear all of this? I mean, you took a little deeper dive into nonprofits. They're struggling. We look at what's going on in economic news, earnings news, unemployment. It seems that things are not going to get economically better for a while, but yet the equity markets are flying high. Why do you think that is?
So that's probably like the amount that people are investing, right?
Do they just see things gonna not be as bad as they are?
people are probably being hopeful. Um, People probably see it as a good opportunity, like everything.
Mhm.
Because the chance now, it's a very risky time, but at the same time,
Mhm.
you could uh, get a lot out of it. You could get a lot of return on your investment
Mhm.
if things
Okay.
start to rebound.
Okay. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say sort of the same thing. A lot of things are decreasing in price right now. So
Mm.
if you buy at that low price and then if you hold it for long enough and things begin to go back up, you can gain a lot of profit on that.
What did you guys learn from doing this?
I really enjoyed it actually. It was a fun article to read, and just to think about some of the places that I went to in Rochester as a kid, like
Mhm.
the Rochester Museum and Science Center, that
Mhm.
kind of place that honestly, when I would go there, it doesn't really get a ton of foot traffic.
Mhm.
Um, Only days when they're having like big events and stuff is when there's probably going to be a lot of people there. So they definitely rely on probably a lot of contributed income and then also support from like the Rochester government probably. So they'll probably be fine through all of this because they'll just have to cut some costs like some variable costs that they have, but they'll be fine. But other places like bars that function also as like music venues, like
Yeah.
they're yeah, and if they're privately owned and they're not like a chain or anything, like a single owner, and what I think about is places that are basically just working month to month, week to week, just trying to get by,
Mhm.
just barely scraping by. They're fresh out of luck during all this. Like they're just not going to be if there maybe there's a chance they can come back after all this, but currently they're out of business completely.
And behavior is going to change when we come back,
Oh yeah.
for sure.
Uh,
Ryan.
Um, I thought it was really interesting looking at like the trend of people going towards more like away from the arts, I guess,
Mhm.
because like I personally have never been like a huge fan of like the whole going to see an orchestra or going to an art gallery, and I
Okay.
thought it was just me, but like
Hmm.
the feeling of being like, I guess I don't want to say like uncomfortable, but like I thought that was just something that I felt. I didn't think that it was like a whole like generation felt the same way.
Interesting.
oh, like going into an art gallery or like
Yeah.
having to stand there and look at everything. It's kind of I'm not really an art gallery person, but I do enjoy musicals sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I mean I did have one musical that made me feel very uncomfortable.
What was that?
It was actually at Geneseo. It was called Pippin. They wanted a lot of crowd involvement, and
Oh.
maybe it's just a personal thing, but I I wasn't comfortable with that.